Okay, so this is the one that we talked about where this is going to be what you would call a glazing method. It's also a really good value study as well. So I'm going to show you how we do this, and I want you to practice this. And then that was one of the exercises I wanted to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reuse what I got here, these washes that I had already made. No sense in wasting the pigment. So I'm actually even going to just take my pipette and I'll just take this and just bring it over into there. So I've got lots going on here. So make yourself a wash. Doesn't have to be really, really thick. Remember, we want to do this in a layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this. I'm going to take my my flat wash and I'm just going to just cover an area. Okay, you don't have to do the entire paper like this one is. Just, you can see where my the ultramarine blue, very granulated. It's got this really cool surface on there. Alright, so we've got this wash. And it could even have been a little bit thinner, but that's fine. Okay, get rid of that. And then I'm going to come in, I'm going to dry this. So for the glazing method, it must be dry between each layer, okay? So that's why you don't want to make it too wet. Just make a nice thin wash. See, this is actually quite dark. I would have even typically done it even lighter than this to start with, depending on what it is that I'm glazing. But for this exercise, the lighter your first layer is, the better, so that you can see those dramatic results. Okay. So that's dry to the touch. Is when it's no longer cool to the back of your hand, then it's dry. So then we're going to take our pencil and we're going to draw in a shape. So we'll stick with the same one. I'm gonna do some fat ones though, so we can get through this quickly. Right, we're just gonna do a little cutesy little thing. So that's the first layer. Okay. Now I'm gonna come in. I'm gonna take my. Let's do the flat again because we're gonna work with the tools in the kit that I gave you. And then we're gonna come in and we're gonna go outside of this. Okay. See how I'm using the edge of my brush to go around, sort of like coloring, and spread that wash around. You don't want it to pool, right? So kind of come out. It's really fun, sort of like it's quite mesmerizing after, but it's really okay. And then bring that out again all the way to the edge. Color that all in. Okay, so you've now just laid another layer on top of the previous. Okay, so there we go. You see how that's darker now than this inner flower? Rinse. And dry. So the thinner the wash, the quicker it'll dry as well too. You don't have to make the paper soaking wet. But you see already how the paper's curled? Because every time I wet that down, it's the sizing has been removed, so the paper will buckle. It's okay. You could tape it down if you want. I very seldom tape. Just depends on what I'm doing. Okay, so now we take our pencil again and we expand on our flower. Let's do this. You know what? Let's go all the way around. Add some petals. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so there's number 2. Got it? So there's the first, there's the second. Now I'm going to take my glaze, my wash again, and I'm going to go outside of that. I am now painting my third layer. Okay, so again, make that a little even. Set that down. There. See already, you can start to see the value, the darker. So each layer, there's more pigment being laid down on top of that. So get our pencil again, come out with our flowers. So obviously this end here is not going to be much more. Come out with this. Right, so now this becomes our third layer, and we're going to now work on the fourth. Right? So now we go outside of that. Try to make it as even as possible. So you could switch to a round at this point, you know, the tighter you get, but I like how the nice little, I like working with the flat. It does get into tight corners, believe it or not. Whoop, got a little puddle going on there. No worries. Take the excess and lift it up. That's called a thirsty brush. Get yourself a thirsty brush. Thirsty brush will soak up any of the excess, right? So here we go again. So we're actually working on layer 4. That's obviously out here isn't going to be. It's just what I'm working on here. Okay. And again. So I've rushed through it. I probably could have been very neat and made quite a nice little pattern out of it. So, you know, do this a few times so that you can get used to it. Not only that, it actually helps you lay down a wash in a more consistent fashion as well. And, you know, they make some really nice little pictures too when you know, play with some abstract shapes too. I got a couple in there I think I showed you the other night. So that's dry. So let's go with the very last one, right? I'm just going to do some not as big a thing. So that's done pretty much there. All right. And so there we are. Okay. So now this is that layer I just finished. That was layer number 4. Now I'm going to do my very last one, which will be a number 5. So this will be the very last. I mean, I probably could squeeze even another one in, but it's not really worth it. Actually, I am gonna switch over. It's pretty tight. The wash, that flat's really nice when it comes to doing washes. Alright. I'm not worried about going over the lines, never was. Well, it does depend on what it is I'm doing, of course. And I'll just pull that through. And there you have it. So let's dry that, and then you'll get a better idea. A big puddle there. It's okay, blow it out. So this is another technique too, where if you want to move pigment across the paper too, you can move it with a hair dryer, right, or a straw. Blow through a straw. All right, and there you have it. I'm not going to worry too much, but it's enough that you can actually see. Voila. There you've actually done a glazing, which we've got now 2, 3, 4, and 5. We've done 5 consecutive layers. So do that several times, and you'll get a really good feel for that value. Now, the other thing that you can do too is, well, that's an exercise that we can talk about where I was telling you before about doing how to get used to doing a value scale. You know, typically most teachers and, you know, artists or whatever, educators will say do the 10 value scale. But I think for absolute beginners who are just learning how to, you know, I usually start off with just a 5. So the white being the lightest value, the full pigment being the darkest, okay? And then you work in between those two and you find that middle value, and then between that middle and the darkest, you know what I'm saying? So that's a really good practice to get into as well. So happy painting, do a couple of these, and we'll see you on Monday.